Picture this. It is 1970. The golden era of American muscle is burning at its absolute brightest. Horsepower numbers are climbing every single year. Engines are getting bigger, louder, and more violent. Detroit's engineers are locked in an arms race with no ceiling and no rules, pouring displacement, compression, and raw mechanical aggression into cars that ordinary Americans can walk into a dealership and buy on a Tuesday afternoon. And then, almost overnight, it ends. Within 3 years, the most powerful muscle cars in American history would be neutered by emissions regulations, strangled by insurance companies, and abandoned by manufacturers who no longer had the political will to defend them. But for one brief, extraordinary window, roughly 1970 to 1972, American automakers produced street cars of such violent, uncompromising performance that the automotive world has spent 5 decades trying to replicate what they achieved. These are the fastest muscle cars of the 1970s. The machines that defined the last great moment of unrestricted American performance. The cars that went out not with a whimper, but with everything they had. If this era belongs in your feed, hit that like button right now. And tell us in the comments, which of these cars would you choose if you could own just one? Because that answer says everything about who you are. We start where any honest conversation about 1970s muscle has to start. With the most violent street engine General Motors ever put in a production automobile. The 1970 Chevelle SS454 LS6 is not the most famous muscle car of its era. It doesn't carry the cultural weight of the Mustang or the visual drama of the Dodge Charger. But on the drag strip, in documented testing by every major automotive publication of the period, it was simply the fastest production muscle car of 1970. The LS6 454 cubic inch V8 was officially rated at 450 horsepower and 500 pound-feet of torque. Unlike many of its contemporaries, that number was largely honest. The LS6 was built with solid lifters, an aggressive camshaft, an aluminum intake manifold, and an 800 CFM Holley carburetor that fed the engine with the kind of unrestricted airflow that produced real, measurable, terrifying power. Car and Driver tested the LS6 Chevelle and recorded a quarter-mile time of 13.44 seconds at 108 miles per hour. Stock, factory fresh, straight off the transport. Nothing in 1970 did it better from the factory floor. But here's what nobody tells you. General Motors had actually developed an even more extreme version, the LS7, rated at 465 horsepower. It was listed in official order guides. Dealers took deposits, and then GM pulled it before a single customer car was delivered, quietly deciding that 450 horsepower was already enough of a statement. The LS7 Chevelle exists only in documents and imagination. What might have been will never stop being fascinating. In the same year that Chevrolet was dropping the LS6 into Chevelles, Chrysler was doing something equally extraordinary on the opposite side of Detroit. The 1970 Plymouth Cuda 426 Hemi remains one of the most desirable and most collectible American muscle cars ever produced, and its performance credentials justify every dollar of its current auction value. The 426 Hemi in street trim, officially rated at 425 horsepower, with real output widely estimated at over 500, transformed the Cuda's relatively compact body into a quarter-mile weapon of remarkable effectiveness. Documented stock testing placed Hemi Cudas in the 13.5-second range at over 107 miles per hour. But the cars that racers actually campaigned, with nothing more than the kind of preparation any serious enthusiast could perform in a home garage, were running well into the 12s. What made the Hemi Cuda particularly special wasn't just the engine, it was the complete package. The Cuda's body was smaller and lighter than the full-size Mopar muscle cars that had previously carried the Hemi. Less weight over the front axle, better balance, a car that felt genuinely athletic rather than simply powerful. And it looked extraordinary. Wide body, aggressive stance, an E-body platform that automotive historians consistently rank among the most beautiful designs of the entire muscle car era. Fewer than 700 Hemi Cudas were built in 1970. Every single one is now priceless. But here's what nobody tells you about 1970. The most unexpected performance story of the year didn't come from Chevrolet or Chrysler. It came from Buick. The 1970 Buick GSX Stage 1 is the most overlooked performance car of its entire era, and the numbers it produced have no right to exist on a car wearing a Buick badge. The Stage 1 455 cubic inch V8 was officially rated at 360 horsepower. That number was so conservative it bordered on parity. The real output, documented through independent testing and later confirmed by engineers who worked on the program, was widely estimated at over 400 horsepower, with torque figures approaching 510 pound-feet. Torque, not horsepower. 510 pound-feet of torque in a street car. In 1970, car and driver ran a GSX Stage 1 through the quarter mile in 13.38 seconds. That was faster than the Hemi Cuda they tested the same year. Faster than the Cobra Jet Mustang. Faster than almost everything that arrived at the Strip with a more celebrated reputation. The automotive press was genuinely stunned. Buick, the brand of comfort, refinement, and suburban respectability, had built a car that could embarrass the most serious muscle cars in America. History forgot it almost immediately. The enthusiasts who owned them never did. 1971 brought new compression ratio requirements as emissions regulations began tightening their grip. Horsepower numbers across the board started falling. Engineers who had spent years pushing output higher were now being asked to pull it back. But before the decline became terminal, a handful of cars delivered one final, extraordinary performance. The 1971 Dodge Charger RT with a 426 Hemi represented Chrysler's last stand with its most celebrated engine and its most celebrated body. The Charger's fastback roofline, already aerodynamically sophisticated compared to most of its competitors, combined with the Hemi's relentless power delivery to produce a car that felt genuinely menacing from behind the wheel. Quarter-mile times in documented testing hovered around 13.5 seconds for stock examples, but the Charger's impact went beyond numbers. It was the complete sensory experience, the sound, the feel, the visual presence that made the Hemi Charger something beyond a performance statistic. It was a statement about what American engineering could produce when the only constraint was the limits of physics. And then there was the car that closed the era with perhaps the most dramatic final act of all, the 1971 Plymouth Roadrunner 440 six-pack. 3 2-barrel Holley carburetors sitting on an Edelbrock intake manifold above a 440 cubic inch V8. The six-pack induction system was visually extraordinary and functionally devastating, opening all 3 carburetors under full throttle to deliver an airflow volume that single carburetor setups simply couldn't match. Officially 385 horsepower, actually considerably more. Quarter-mile times in the 13.5-second range for stock examples, with modest preparation pushing them comfortably into the 12s. The Roadrunner had always been about pure performance at an accessible price. The six-pack version delivered on that promise with a brutality that felt almost defiant, as if Plymouth knew the end was coming and decided to make the last chapter as loud as possible. By 1972, it was effectively over. Compression ratios had dropped. Horsepower ratings had fallen dramatically. The insurance industry had made high-performance cars financially inaccessible for many buyers. The fuel crisis was approaching. The regulatory environment was tightening with no sign of reversal. The muscle car era didn't end with a single event. It ended with a series of compromises, each one reasonable in isolation, collectively devastating in effect. And the cars that had existed in that final window, the LS6 Chevelle, the Hemi Cuda, the GSX Stage 1, the Hemi Charger, the Roadrunner six-pack, became frozen in time. Artifacts from a moment when American performance had reached its absolute ceiling, and then been forced back down by forces that engineering alone couldn't overcome. Here is what those cars really represent. They represent the last time American automakers built street cars with complete, unapologetic disregard for anything except performance. No compromise, no corporate caution, no regulatory retreat, just displacement, compression, airflow. and the absolute mechanical honesty of engines that were built to do one thing: go as fast as physics would allow. That window lasted maybe 3 years. The cars it produced have lasted forever. Which of these cars do you think was the greatest of the era, and which one does history most underrate? Drop it in the comments. The debate starts now.